All right, welcome back to Talk Sensors. Today we're diving into a paper that, takes a look at something we've all been wondering about.
Yeah. How are students actually using these large language models? I mean, everyone's talking about it. Are they just getting the easy answers, or is there more to it?
Exactly. Like, is it helping them learn, or is it, just a shortcut? So this paper is called the StudyChat Dataset, Student Dialogues with ChatGPT in an Artificial Intelligence Course. And it's from a research team at a pretty big U.S. university.
And they actually they built their own ChatGPT-like tool for their intro AI course.
Yeah, and they collected like a massive amount of data on how students used it.
Over 1,000 conversations across 7 different programming assignments. So we're finally getting some real-world insights into, how this is actually playing out in the classroom.
Okay, so let's break this down. The paper starts by setting the stage, right? LLMs, huge potential in education, personalized feedback, interactive learning, all that.
Right. But also, concerns.
Of course, concerns.
Misuse, over-reliance. The classic kind of anxieties around new tech.
Right. So the researchers, they really wanted to move beyond speculation and get some hard data on what's actually happening.
To see how students are really using these LLM tools in a real academic setting, not just, hypothetical scenarios.
And this is key for both improving those AI tutoring systems we keep hearing about, and for getting a better grasp on how students learn in this, rapidly changing landscape.
Exactly. So then they do a really good job of laying out the existing research in this area.
Yeah, the context. Right?
Yeah, the context. There's actually been quite a bit of work already on ChatGPT in classrooms, studies on how it's used to generate content, to explain concepts, even as like a virtual teaching assistant.
I mean, it's amazing how much has been published already, considering how new this technology is.
Yeah, it's really exploding. And they highlight some particularly interesting work that's been done in computer science courses, looking at how students actually ask questions to these models. Like, what are the patterns in their queries?
And that's where they bring in this idea of education discourse analysis.
Right. So this is a whole field that tries to understand the structure and function of language in educational settings. Like, how do people communicate during learning? And they use a method called dialogue act classification to analyze these conversations.
So instead of just seeing like a stream of text, they can tag each utterance with what the speaker is trying to do. Like, are they asking a question? Are they giving information? Are they requesting something?
Exactly. It's a way to make sense of the patterns in these student AI interactions.
And they also point out that there are already some data sets of educational dialogues out there, but most of them are focused on like K-12 or other subjects. So this StudyChat data set is really valuable because it specifically looks at university-level computer science.
Right. So let's dive into the data set itself. They ran this study in an introductory AI course at a top U.S. research university.
Like a proper R1 institution.
Yeah. Out of 117 students in the course, 84 consented to have their interactions recorded.
And the ones who didn't consent could still use the tool.
Yeah, absolutely. Everyone had access, so no one was at a disadvantage. The course ran for 15 weeks, classic lectures, regular programming assignments, the whole 9 yards.
And now here's where things get interesting. They didn't just let students use like whatever external ChatGPT tool they wanted.
No, they actually built their own custom web application that basically mirrored the functionality of ChatGPT.
Clever.
Yeah, they used the, at the time, free version of the underlying language model, which allowed them to record everything that was happening in those student AI interactions.
Oh, very smart.
Students were explicitly told they could use this tool for anything, all assignments, even the final project.
So it was a really realistic representation of how students might actually use these LLMs in their studies. They also collected all the students' assignment submissions and ran a pre-course survey to get a sense of their background and their attitudes towards LLMs.
Yeah, getting that baseline data is important. Now, of course, data privacy is a huge concern, especially when you're dealing with student data.
Right, absolutely.
So the researchers go into quite a bit of detail about how they anonymized the data. They removed all personally identifiable information, particularly from things like terminal outputs and error messages, which can sometimes contain usernames or file paths.
It's amazing what can slip through the cracks, right?
Yeah. So they used automated scripts and then manually reviewed everything to make sure it was clean. They acknowledged that, you can never be 100% sure you've caught everything, but they were very thorough.
So what are we talking about here? How much data did they actually collect?
Oh, a lot. Almost 8,000 exchanges between students and the AI across those 7 programming assignments. The average conversation was fairly short, but some students really use the tool extensively. So you have what they call a skewed distribution.
Yeah, a few power users, basically.
Right, which is typical when you introduce a new technology. Now, to make sense of all that text, they had to come up with a system for categorizing the different types of interactions.
This is where the dialogue act classification comes in.
Exactly. They developed this 2-level labeling system where each utterance is tagged with the speaker's intent. So they had categories like writing for code generation, editing for code correction, contextual questions about the assignment, conceptual questions about the broader ideas.
It's a really comprehensive system.
Yeah, they also had categories for verification of understanding, providing context to the AI, off-topic conversations, and a few others.
And they were very rigorous about testing this labeling system.
Yeah, they had multiple people independently label a sample of the conversations and measured how much they agreed. And they found really high levels of agreement for most of the categories, which means the system is pretty reliable. Then, to label all those thousands of conversations, they actually used the same AI model that powered the chatbot itself, giving it very specific instructions on how to apply the labels.
Meta.
It is a little meta, yeah. And then they checked how well the AI's labels matched the human labels, and there was moderate agreement there. They point out that the AI sometimes missed some of the nuances because it didn't have the full course context that a human would.
Makes sense. AI is powerful, but it's not perfect.
Right. So now they've got this huge data set of labeled conversations, and the big question is, what does it all mean? How does using this AI tutor relate to how well students actually learn?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It is. So they start by looking at the distribution of those dialogue act labels, like what were the most common types of interactions. And they found that contextual questions were super prevalent.
So students were really using the LLM to understand the assignments, not just to get quick answers.
Yeah, especially questions about the specific requirements of the assignment and requests for explanations of code.
Makes sense. They want to make sure they're on the right track before they dive in.
Right. And while students did use the LLM to write code, the fact that these question-asking behaviors were so common suggests that they were also using it as a tool for comprehension, which is really encouraging.
It shows a level of engagement that goes beyond just trying to get the AI to do all the work.
Exactly. Then they get into the really meaty stuff. The course outcome regression analysis.
Okay, so this is where they try to see if there's a connection between how students use the chatbot and how well they performed in the course.
Exactly. They looked at grades on both the assignments where they were allowed to use the LLM and the quizzes and exams where they weren't. And they used statistical models to see if any of the factors they identified, like the different dialogue act categories, the survey responses, could predict student performance.
So they built one model for the LLM allowed assignments and one for the LLM prohibited assessments.
Right. And for the LLM allowed assignments, they found a positive correlation between providing the AI with a lot of details about the assignment information and getting better grades.
Well, yeah, if you give the AI more context, it's going to be able to help you more effectively. That makes sense.
It does. But what's really interesting is that they also found a positive correlation between asking more other conceptual questions and doing better on those assignments.
So the students who are really trying to understand the concepts, not just the specific task at hand, are the ones who are excelling.
Exactly. It suggests that these are the students who are more curious, more engaged with the material.
Which is a good sign. But what happened when they looked at the LLM prohibited assessments?
Well, that's where we start to see some potentially concerning patterns. They found a negative correlation between using the LLM to deal with error messages and performance on the quizzes and exams.
Oh, so the students who are heavily reliant on the AI to debug their code might not have developed as strong a fundamental understanding.
That's the hypothesis. And they also found a slightly negative correlation with asking conceptual questions specifically about programming tools, which further supports this idea of potential over-reliance.
So it's like they're using the LLM as a crutch instead of really grappling with the concepts themselves.
Yeah, and it seems to be hurting them when they have to solve problems on their own. Interestingly, they did see a positive correlation between actively describing the assignment to the LLM in their own words and performing better on the LLM prohibited assessments. So there seems to be a difference between passively asking for help and actively engaging with the tool as a learning partner.
It's all about how you use it.
Precisely. Now, the researchers are very careful to point out that these are just initial findings. There's a lot more research to be done.
Of course, this is a very new field.
But these correlations do suggest that there are patterns in how students use LLMs, and those patterns might be linked to how well they learn. And this could have huge implications for how we think about education in this age of AI.
Yeah, I mean, for educators, this data can help them design their courses and assignments in a way that encourages deeper learning and avoids over-reliance on LLMs.
Exactly. They might need to create tasks that are less susceptible to just being solved by an AI.
Or explicitly teach students how to use these tools effectively as learning aids, rather than just shortcut generators. And for the people developing educational AI tools, this research can help them design systems that support real understanding and engagement, not just quick fixes.
Right, systems that encourage those positive interaction patterns we were talking about. And for students, being aware of these potential pitfalls, knowing how different ways of using LLMs can impact their learning is really important.
It's all about empowering them to make informed choices. Okay, now for our novel notions segment, where we take these findings and think about where they might lead. What new research questions come to mind?
Well, I think it would be fascinating to see how these students' interactions with the LLM in this introductory course relate to their performance in more advanced AI courses down the line.
Longitudinal study.
Exactly. Could we develop a model of what we might call LLM-assisted learning maturity?
LLM-assisted learning maturity, I like it.
So imagine we take this StudyChat dataset and link it to their grades in later courses, maybe even their career trajectories.
Ambitious, but yeah, I see where you're going.
If we see that students who consistently use the LLM for conceptual exploration and understanding in this intro course go on to excel in, say, a graduate-level ML course, that would be a really strong indicator that those early interaction patterns were a sign of positive LLM integration.
They learned how to use the tool effectively to support their learning.
Right. And conversely, if we see that students who relied heavily on the LLM for debugging and struggled on the assessments where it wasn't allowed, if they continue to struggle in later courses, that would suggest a different pattern. Developing this kind of predictive model, even a rudimentary one at first, could be hugely valuable for educators. It could help identify students who might be at risk of developing an unhealthy dependence on LLMs and intervene early on.
It's like a personalized early warning system. That's a really cool idea. What else are you thinking about?
Well, building on their work with the Dialogue Act classification, I'm really curious about the temporal dynamics of these interactions.
You mean how the conversation unfolds over time?
Yeah, like within a single problem-solving session, can we identify specific moments where students get stuck and start to excessively rely on the LLM without really understanding what's going on?
So maybe they're repeatedly asking for code for the same subproblem, or they're just pasting in error messages without asking any questions about why those errors are happening.
Yeah. Exactly. If we can detect these patterns, we can start to think about how future educational LLMs could be designed to intervene in a more intelligent, more pedagogical way.
So instead of just giving the answer, they could offer hints, ask guiding questions, nudge the student back towards a more active problem-solving approach.
Right. It's like providing LLM-assisted metacognitive scaffolding, helping students become aware of their own thought processes and develop more effective learning strategies.
It's almost like having an AI tutor that can sense when you're about to fall into a bad habit and gently steers you back on course.
That's the dream, right? And this StudyChat dataset gives us a really solid foundation for exploring these ideas.
It's a great example of how empirical research can inform the development and use of these powerful new technologies in a way that genuinely supports learning.
Yeah, it's really exciting to see this kind of work being done.
It's a whole new world out there, and we're just starting to understand the possibilities and the potential pitfalls.
That's for sure. This paper is definitely worth a read. The link is in the description, by the way.
Excellent. And that brings us to the end of another deep dive. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time on Talk Tensors.
Until then, keep learning and keep exploring.